Okay, we talked about Angular, the framework, uh, last week, and we get our first Angular project done. So before we move on today's material, are there any questions? Okay, very good. No questions. So let me bring up the Angular that we have done. So I'm gonna go inside my VCR, my VSC. I'm gonna start a new terminal there, so I want to run my Angular project. So we go into my Angular project. All right, let me share the screen so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so I'm in my VSC editor inside my first project folder. I'm going to do ng-serve, and that using the open option that allows me to serve my project, and then open the browser uh, to see my application there. All right, so this is my application or project that we completed last week. We're going to use this project, and then we're going to look at data binding. So data binding is a very important feature in Angular. If you recall, Angular framework is based on the MVC model. So this data binding is binding the model or the data from the model to the view in the HTML. So this data binding gets the data from the model to the view, and also some vice versa. All right. So how do we add photo? Well, adding photo will be the same as what you did in HTML. All right. You use the image tag. So what you put into the HTML is exactly the same as as what you covered last week. All right. I mean the last term, or you should know about getting the image displayed in the HTML. So quickly show you what it is. It's simply an image tag, all right? And in fact, it is already in the slide last week. Okay. All right. Now the code in the template file, that's exactly the HTML code. So there's no difference. Okay. Okay. If you want to run the previous project, well, then you have to open up the terminal window and do the ng-serve again. Okay, that will let you run the project again. When you open up the terminal window and you do ng-serve again. Okay, ng-serve, you can use the open option and to open the browser, just exactly like what we did last time, if you recall. Okay, all right. So yeah, Friday I will get you a look at your problems during the break. Okay, no problem with that. All right. So data binding, it gets the data from the model, all right, and it sends it to the view, and or vice versa. So we'll look at now. There are four types of data binding in Angular. The first type is called string interpolation, and then the second one is property binding, and then event binding, and then the two-way data binding. We go look at each one of them, and then we're gonna have some example. Data binding is a one-way data binding from the model to the view. Namely, in the model, we define the data, and then the data will be automatically assigned to the HTML elements in the view. All right. So, and the syntax is that we're going to, in the view, we're going to use the name of the property that we defined in the model, and enclose with two curly brackets. Right. So this is one way data binding from the model to the view, or from the component to the DOM. Okay. So we're gonna do some examples later. Now the second that type of data binding is what we call the property binding. Again, it is a one way from the model to the view. Same thing here. However, what we're binding in the view is a property that we find in the HTML elements, the property of the HTML elements. All right, so we can bind that to a variable or property that we defined in the model. Okay, and the syntax is that we put in target, the target, namely the property that we find in the HTML elements, and then enclose it by a pair of square brackets. Okay, or another way, another syntax would then to use the word bind, the keyword bind dash, and then the target. Again, the target is the property of the HTML elements, and then bind it to a property that we defined in the model. All right, so the target, as we said, it is a property of HTML elements, or you can use the term attribute of HTML element. So an example would be what is okay, disabled or hidden. All right, so those are the properties or attributes of an HTML element. We can bind that to a property that we've defined in the model. We're going to have examples. All right, so this one binds a property. So that's why it's called a property binding. And then the third type, this is you should know about this one. This is the event binding. There's also one way, but this time, this one way is from the DOM or from the model. Sorry, from the view to the model. All right, the last two binding that we look at, the string interpolation and the property binding is one way. They also one way, but one way from the model or components to the view or to the DOM. But this one, event binding, again, is one way binding, but from the DOM or from the view to the model. The reason being, you defined an event, all right, but the activation is from the template or from the view. For example, you define a click event and then attach it to a button. So to activate or to invoke that event, somebody will have to click on that button in the view. All right, so this is from the view to the model, or you can say from the DOM to the component. And the syntax is that you put the event and then enclose it with a pair of parentheses. Then you bind it to a method that you defined in the model. So when this event was invoked, the method or function that you defined in the model will be invoked. So this is very similar to the event handler, right? That you know of from JavaScript. Another syntax is that we can use the on dash keyword. So on dash event, and it binds it to a method that we define in the model. Okay. So we can look at the last event binding. Now this one is not one way, but two-way data binding. is primarily used in the input element, whereby an input can be, you can define a variable in the model and then binds it to an input element in the view. Or somebody can enter some data into an input element, and then the variable or property that you defined in the model will get the value. So it's two-way. All right, it can go two ways. The syntax is that we can use the ng model directive, all right, and then enclosed by a pair of parentheses, and then on the outside a pair of square brackets. And we'll bind this to again similar to the other to the string interpolation and the property data binding. We bind it to a property that we defined in the property in the model. Okay, or another syntax would be we can use the bind on dash keyword, and then bind on dash ng model. All right, and then bind it to a property that we define in the model. So this two-way binding, in fact, it is a combination of property binding and event binding. All right, if you look at syntax, so what do we have here? We have a pair of square bracket and the inside parentheses. If you recall the event binding, we use parentheses. The property binding, we use a square bracket. So, but the two-way binding, we use the square bracket and also the parentheses. So this is in fact a combination of a property binding and an event binding. Okay. Now, if we have a two-way data binding, we could in fact, there's a special event that we can set up, and this event is called ng model change. If there's any changes in the input, we can define a method, all right, to monitor the change. If there's any change in the input, we can bind it to a method that we define in the model. Right, two-way data binding is mainly used with the input elements. Okay, and if we need to use this two-way binding, this ng model directive, we need to import the forms module. All right, we import that into the root module. We looked at that last time. All right, so if you have not imported this forms module, you will not be able to use the ng model directive. You'll get an error. So make sure that if you can have a need for this two-way binding, make sure you import the forms module in the root module. All right. So any questions so far? We're gonna look at some example. Okay. All right. So let's look at each data binding and work on some example. The first one, the string interpolation. This is a one-way data binding from the model to the view. We'll define a property in the model, and then the data of that property can be displayed in the view using the syntax, the property name, and then with a pair of curly brackets. Let's look at some example. Oops, sorry. All right, so this is what we had from last week, right? And if we look at the code, this is the content, and we have this one, student info. All right, by Andy. This is by Andy. This is pretty much hard-coded. So and this is from which component it is from? Do you recall? This header Angular app, which component? No, not root. Not root component. No, not app. Do you remember? I show you code data, but in the app last week, we generated 3 components, right? And those are what we call the feature components. The root component, what we can display in the root component, but the root component is usually used to hold the feature components, right? So let me show you the root component. The root component is the app component.html, right? This is what we use to put the what do we have in here? What is this? It's the customized tag, right? For each of the 3 components, the header, the content, and footer. And where do we find this tag? You recall? We can find this tag in the components model, and that is the selector. Okay, the selector. If you look at the header selector, go to the model, and in the component decorator, the selector. Okay, so the root component HTML, yeah, we can display things in here, but usually if you have other components, well, you will put the selectors of the components in here. Okay, so this one here, I think it belongs to the header component. So let's look at the header component. Yep, it is in here. Angular app by Andy. All right, now this, I'm hard coding this. I don't need to. I could set up a property in the model and assign some value, and then use the string interpolation, display the property in the template or in the view. Okay, so let's do that. So I'm going to go into my header model. This is header model. This is the header view, right? HTML is view. TS is model. So in here, I'm gonna, yeah, I just assign my name. I assign a property called my name and find the value and the pack. What I have, and so I go to the model. Now in the property, I've got a in the model. Sorry, yeah, in the model, I've got a property. It's called my name. So in the view, I'm gonna put the use the string interpolation. Put the property name in the middle and close with a pair of curly brackets. Right. So this is my name. Okay. And then 2 curly brackets, open, close. And this allows me to get transfer or get the property from the model and display it to the view. Okay, I'm just going to save it. I'm going to go in here. There you go. And the back. Okay, so I'm not hard coding anything. I'm getting the value from the property that I defined in the model and got it displayed using one-way string interpolation. Get it displayed in the view. Okay, I'm going to make a change. Save. Changed. Okay, that's one-way interpolation. Well, what about this ones? Yeah, okay. Enter your name, campus number, username. Yeah, we can do that. Let's do one more. So we know this is part of the content component. All right. So I'm going to go there. Content component. I'm going to look at the HTML. Yep. It is going to be there, right? I can see the picture, the name, the number, the username, and campus, right? So I'm going to go in there and, of course, go and open up the content model, which is the TS file. Again, I'm going to use one-way string interpolation. And this time, let's do the what do we have here? Name, okay? I'm going to do the name. Enter your name. Well, enter your name. I'm going to change it. In here, I'm going to define a property. I'll call it uh, me. Okay, it doesn't matter. Call it me and Andy. Okay. This is the name of the property. It's called me. I save it. And then I'm going to go to my view name. Okay. Enter my name. I'm going to use one-way string interpolation. Me. Okay. That's it. Done. Andy. Okay. Done. Campus. Let's do campus. I'm going to define another variable called it campus equals to Davis. All right. Save it, and then using the one-way string interpolation. Don't want to hard code it, so I'm going to put in there campus. Okay, and I could save, change it. Well, campus, maybe change to another one. Trafalgar. There you go. Okay, we can do the number too, instead of hard coding it. All right, but I'll let you work on this too. So I've used one-way string interpolation to for the name and for the campus, right? So I want you to do the numbers, do the number and the username using string interpolation. Okay, you should be able to do that. Is there any questions on string interpolation? One way from the model to the view. One thing we need to do is the first thing we need to define a property in the model, and then in the view, we just display it. Display the name of the property and close with a pair of curly brackets. Is there any questions on string interpolation? All right, cool. All right, this is this is the practice. Okay, I think we've just done it. All right. Oh, this is cool. Let's work on more. Now, I was just going to go there and see here we have name, campus, number, and username, right? We could be doing exactly like what I'm just working on, right? With for each piece of data, we could define a variable. But what we could do is that we could define uh, you define an object, right? For for the data that we're looking at here, we can call this profile. My profile. My profile, we can define it as an object, and then with property such as name, campus, ID, and username. Okay, and we don't really need to again define it in here. What you could do is we could define as an external data. Okay, so let's do that. To define and to define it as an external data, we need to define a type. Right, a type meaning like a class, so that when we read the data, we know the name of the properties that we're reading in. Okay, so this is similar to the assignment 2. When we read the JSON file, if you recall, I asked you to prepare a class. Okay, so this is exactly the same thing. We're going to read some external data, but before we can do that, we need to define a type. A type can be a class, or it can be an interface. Right, so let's work on the class. So we're going to define a class. When we define a class, we can define it in the TS or in the model of a component. But what if we want the class to be used by other components? So we'll define a class in a separate file. Okay, so this class we'll be defining. In fact, we're going to use this class and then create some data, which I'll call it student data or profile data that will have name, campus, number, and username. All right. So this class that I'm creating will have ID, name, campus, and login. So, but first of all, I want to get this class into a file. And well, since it's called student, I'll create a file called student.ts file. It is going to be a TypeScript file. So I'm creating this one as this is simply a test file containing a class. So I'll go to my app folder, right? We'll create this inside the app folder. I'm gonna add the new file. The name is called student.ts. Inside, I'm gonna create the class. So I can say class, all right, class, and then I'm gonna add all this. Oops, sorry. Okay, so just forget about interface. We'll look at the class first. I'll explain what the interface is later. Right, so we have a class defined here, and this class is called student. All right, this is pretty much the same as defining class in JavaScript. And then once the first one property is called SID, student ID, which is number, student name, string, student campus, string, student login, string. Okay, well now this is all pretty good, right? But except you see a little bit of these funny little characters here. In TypeScript, when you define a class or when you define property, they want to make sure the property has a value, right? Or has been initialized. Okay. Otherwise, you get an error. See that? You get an error. The error says this property SID has no identifier or is not definitely assigned in the constructor. So either we do that, we assign to the constructor, or we do something to initialize this. And one quick way is to use this exclamation mark to initialize this property. Okay. Another way is to say use pipe it to the undefined. So we're going to tell the TypeScript that yeah, we know this is undefined. So it's not an error that would it's not an oversight that we did not initialize it. We want this to be undefined. Okay, so then TypeScript say, hey, this is not a mistake, it's not an oversight, and it's fine. Okay, so when you run into some errors, and if the error is about you have not no initializer, then you know what to do. Then the question, this is new. Before I forget the version number. Before in some earlier version of TS, it wasn't required. Okay. All right. Questions coming up. I think I have in the last week in the deck. I have I think the last slide. I think it talk a bit about this. Yeah, we can do that. I'm just showing you the different ways. Okay. I'm just showing you different ways. Okay. We can do that. Same thing. Okay. Or in here, we can say pipe it to undefined. All right. Let me show you. I think I have it in here. Not this one. The project, definitely. There you go. Okay. Uh, yeah, there you go. There you go. Right. This is the slide, the last pretty much last one in last week. Yeah, I think the TypeScript is 272. Before 272, it wasn't required. All right. But since 272, it required class to be initialized at the point of declaration. Okay. So we can use the pipet to then define it. So tell the TypeScript that, hey, we know this is undefined, or we can assign the, all right, this is assignment and sessions to say, hey, again, this is, we know this is not defined, okay. Or if we, there's another way to silence this, is actually go into the compiler option of the TS config file, all right, and then find this option, find the strict property, add this property to the compiler option and turn it off. Okay, if we do that, then we do not ever need to use type it to undefined or do the assignment as assertion. So either way, there are different ways to do it. Okay, but then you have to know that, you know, every time you need to properly initialize, okay, the property. That's why the TypeScript make this check. Okay, but if you do this, if you add the strict property initialization and turn it off in the compiler option, then you don't really have to do anything about this. Okay, so what we're gonna use? Yeah, we're gonna use it for the data. Remember, if you recall the assignment 2, right? Before you read the JSON file, you need to define the class, and then you use the class to instantiate new objects. We're going to use this. Okay, this is going to be used as a type. Any questions so far? Good. All right. Now this is a class that we defined, and this class is good. It's called student, and it has 4 properties. However, one thing we need to do is to export this. All right. If we don't export, we won't be able to find it. Okay. So one thing for sure, you need to export it so that other components will be able to import it. Okay. So this is done, and now we're gonna import it. Okay. So we're gonna import this as a type. So we'll go to the PS file, which is a model, and I'm gonna import it. Import. I'm gonna import the class. All right. There you go. PSC knows it, and it inserts the rest for us. Okay. After import it, I'm going to define a property here. Okay. And then I'm going to get some data in here. So the name of, I'm going to use this one, current. I'm going to define a property. All right. I call current student, or I can call it me. All right, me. So I have 2 me here. So I'm going to delete this me. All right. The property defined is called me. Now, what is this? What is this? This is to define the type. Me is a property that has the type student. Okay, so as I said, this class here or interface we're defining as a type. So to make sure the data will have this exact properties. But TypeScript is very straight on type. All right, so we're going to use this class as type. So when we define a property here in the component model, I'm going to use this class as type. So in here, I'm defining the object. Object will need to have the properties of this class. So SID, name, campus, and login. All right. So if I SIDD, oops, I get an error. Okay, the error is that, hey, it's not assignable to the type student because the type student does not have a property called SIDD. Okay, so this actually checks every time I use class as a type. Okay, so this is good. Make sure the property that I'm defining to this variable or to this property is correct. Okay, so here I'm good. So I've got this property called me. Use this class student as type so that I want to make sure all these properties are populated. Oops. Any questions so far? All right. So I'm gonna now, if we go to the template or the view, I'm sorry. Okay, let me just. We can see here there's an error because it's looking in the view and trying to find campers. Campers not there. I've just deleted campers because I'm not going to use several properties. Right, for all this data, I'm going to just define one property called me, and which is an object. Okay, so I'm going to go to the view of the content component. So here, the name is not going to be me. It's going to be me dot as name. Okay, me dot as name, and the campus is going to be me dot as campus as CAM campus. All right, I'm going to save it. I'm going to check. There you go. Got it. John Doe and Davis. Wonderful. All right, so let's look at some more. Number, no more hard coding. All right. The one-way string interpolation. The property is me, which is an object that has properties called number, which is the SID. Go check. Great. The last one is username. So enter your username, one-way interpolation. For the double curly brackets. The name of prompt is me dot what? Me dot login. As login. Close it. There you go. Okay, go J. Done. Very good. So now instead of defining 4 properties, we define one property, right? Which is an object. But then because of this is of an object, I'm define the class called student to use it as a type. Okay. Why we got the error earlier? What error? Not sure which error. Yeah. What? When we were changing it? Yeah, because if it's looking for. Yeah, because if we were making changes to the view into property when it's not done, because this is a live server, right? Any changes, it will be reflected in the view. If for example, if I'm making change to this property, I call my student, right? Of course, I have to save it. Now I'm gonna get error because make the changes in the model, but have not make it to the view. So in the view, I'm still seeing my as name. See that? Okay. But after I make all these changes, then it'll be good. Okay. Because while you're making changes, you need to make all of them. But sometimes you can because you make it one at a time, and then after you make some changes, you're gonna save it. Now, if I make this one last change, I should be good. There you go. Okay. All right. Because yeah, we're making changes, right? Because we had a me here. We had a me here, all right? Just me with the name. So I but then that me has changed to an object. Okay. Great. Now all changes are good. So we've used the one-way string interpolation to change this and also all the student info. Okay. Good. Let's move on. Now, for practice, I want you to update. Well, okay, sorry. Well, we update the content. Uh, so yeah, update the header. Okay, so update the header component by since we have the student defined as a class. Now repeat the same thing, but this time added the header component. Okay, I guess we added the content component. So okay, added the header component, and use the class the student class, right, to get some data. Okay. All right, property binding. Property binding, one way data binding from again from the model to the view, but we're binding the property of the HTML elements in the DOM. Okay, the HTML. Name me some some the elements of the some property of the element that you know of. Anything? Do you remember any properties of the elements? Input elements, maybe. Type, right? What else? Disabled, hidden, placeholder, right? All of those are properties of the elements, right? So this property binding is actually binding those properties of the HTML. Required, exactly required. Right? We can bind those to a property that we defined in the model. Okay, so let's try it. Let's get this into our content HTML, right? But before we do that, let's look at this. Well, this is simple, simple, straightforward. The HTML elements. We have a div, we have h3, oh, we have a paragraph with what is this? One-way string interpolation, okay, and then we have an input. Oh, input here we have a placeholder, and we are binding the placeholder. Okay, here we're using the property binding. We're binding the placeholder property of the input element to what is this? To property called city in the model. Okay, so oh, another property binding here. Bind dash placeholder. This is another syntax. All right, so either we bind it using the square bracket or we use the keyword bind dash. And here we have examples of both syntaxes. This is putting the property inside a pair of square brackets, and then we have the bind dash. Okay, both bind to the same property called city. Okay, And then we have label, that's fine. We have a button element. Oh, this disabled is a property of this button element. This is a property binding again. What are we binding? Well, we binding to condition. Okay. Why is that? Well, because disabled takes in the value of what? True or false. All right. So we're binding it to an expression or condition that will return either true or false. Does that make sense? So here we're saying that if the city is known, okay, so disabled will be true if the city is known. Okay, make sense? This is a condition. This will return true if the city property is null. All right. And then it will return true to this disabled. Disabled will be true. If we want the button to be enabled, the city must have value. Okay. Yeah, we can do that. Same thing here. But then we know, the tree with JavaScript, right? So this is pretty much JavaScript. Okay. Yep. So we're gonna copy this into the content HTML, right? The content HTML is going to be here. I'm going to get in this the content element. I'm going to save this, but when I save this, I will get error. All right. Hey, city is not there. All right. Try to find the city because we use one-way string interpolation. So in the view, we have this city. All right. But in the model, we have not. So I'm going to define the city in the model. All right. The city equals to Brampton. Right. Let's save it. That should be good. All right. Because the one-way interpolation looking for a property called city. Okay. And now city has it. Okay. So let's look at the logic here. So we'll see X3. All right. Yeah, which is X3. And we'll see a paragraph called city. I mean, this city, one-way interpretation. I'm going to change this. This is the city is. Okay. So the city is, we know this paragraph, this city is Brampton. Very, very good because one-way string interpolation, Brampton, in Brampton. All right. So, and then we have input. Input, we're binding the placeholder to a variable called city in here, Brampton. So the placeholder for this input element will read Brampton. There you go. This is a placeholder, right? Right. And then we have another input. Same thing here. We're binding using a bind dash, binding the placeholder again. City. Okay. Right. City has a value Brampton. Good. Lastly, the button. The button will binding the disabled, and we set that the logic is if the city equals to null or have nothing, then the button will be disabled. But what do what do we have for the property city? It's not null. We have rammed it, and hence this is false. If this is false, then the button will be enabled. We're enabled, so we can see that. We click on it. All right, but we can change it. If we change, so in here we say no. So this will be true, and hence the button will be disabled. We won't be able to see that. Okay, so it is placeholder nothing, nothing. The button disabled. We're not able to click on it. Okay, are we good so far? Very good, eh? So I'm going to change this to Toronto. This is the city is Toronto, placeholder, enabled. Okay, all not disabled. Maybe we can change it. Okay, value. There you go. I changed this bind to not to placeholder, but value. So the default value is city. First input, that's a placeholder. The second input is a value. Okay, you see that? So this is a property binding. We can bind any property of an HTML element to a property that we defined in the model. Okay, are we good so far? It's easy, eh? Once we understand the logic, it's not too hard. All right, let's move on. Okay, so we know that. I'll just explain this three property binding. Let's do a little I mean property binding. Not this time. It's gonna be on images. So we'll get this image. All right, I'm gonna get this image. I think we have this image. Oh, you know what? Let's use that. All right, let's use that image. All right. We have the image in the content, right? So this is going to be here. What if we input in the city? Yeah, we just did. Oh, you mean here? Nothing? Nothing. So far, nothing. Nothing. But we're gonna make when we look at the two-way binding, well, we're gonna have fun with it. All right, but so far, nothing. All right. Let's okay. Let's do this. We'll look at the. We're gonna bind the SRC. All right. So so far the SRC is gonna be hard coded. All right. We'll hard code the image, but we don't need to. All right. We don't need to. Okay. We bind the property SRC of the image. We bind this to my image. Okay, this is going to be the property that we will define in the model. But let's save this, and we know that if we save it, I'll get an error because the system is trying to look for a property called my image in the model. It's not there yet. I'm going to get in says my image equals to. I'm going to copy here so that it won't make a mistake. All right. Okay, I'm gonna save it. There you go. Image is back. What it means is we're not gonna do hard code the image in the HTML. Everything comes from the model. Okay. The difference between this one and the previous one is that we use property binding and we bind the SRC, which is property of the image tag or element, to this variable, and in the my image property in the model will have the location and name of the image file. Okay, this simple. All right. There's another one. We can actually, bind inner HTML. The inner HTML is a property, right, of a tag. So I'm gonna add one more in here. Right. Oops, sorry. Okay, this is the property. I say this is the paragraph. Save it. Go to. Oops. We'll go here and say, hey, this is the paragraph. But I'm gonna make some change. So I'm gonna go in there. I'm gonna bind the inner HTML. All right. So in here, inner HTML. I'm gonna bind it to one called content. All right, content. Okay, because we get error. This, so in here I'm going to say content equals to hello. Oh, uh, this is the paragraph. Oh, sorry, I'm missing the. There you go. Hello. Okay. So the inner HTML of this paragraph, even though okay, if we don't have this, I think we look at it. I have this. This is paragraph, right? But we could actually change it. So we won't be hard coding in HTML of this element, but instead binds it to property that we define in the model, and this is the value of that property content. Okay, and it says well, hello. So oops, here, let me save this. Hello. Okay, so whatever property you want to bind, we can do that. Okay, so that is property binding. So any questions? All right, cool. Event binding. Somebody asked, hey, what happened to the button? Now, okay, how the button gonna work? Which was asked. Yep, we can make it work. We can create an event binding, so to speak, using the event binding in Angular. This event binding is one way data binding, but this time is one way from the view back to the model, because to invoke an event, we need to do it from the view. All right, do it from the view, and this is the syntax. Okay, great. Now we have no. Okay, we have this, right? So city placeholder value. I think we've tried the value. Okay. So we go to here. I think we've tried the value here, right? We're binding the value, so which is good. But I'm gonna do this here. This is pretty much the second one. Placeholder, um, placeholder equals city. Yeah, you know what? Let's do this. I'm gonna change this too. All right. Yes. Change it back so that when you know you go home, when you do this example again from the side, you'll be able to follow. All right. In here, I'm gonna also assign the value. All right, equals to city. All right, this is one way interpolation. So the value will be equal to the city. So this is pretty much the same placeholder and the value. So the value will in fact override the placeholder. Okay. But in the button, I'm going to define an event. All right. This event is quick event, and this event is attached to the button. So in here, I'm gonna define the event. This is the event, right? In the parentheses, I'm gonna bind this event to method. I'm gonna define in the model. Okay, the method is called clear city. All right, so I'm gonna save this, and if we go to the, so you can see here, failed to compile because the Angular is trying to find the method called clear city from the model, and of course it's not there. So I'm gonna go in there and add this clear city. All right. Here let's say alert. Say hello. Okay. Go to the view. Well, this is the button that has the quick event attached to it, and it will say hello. Hello. Good. So that event is working. All right. So hello. And if this is working, we can put whatever inside this function or method. Okay. So if I go to this line, I want to repeat here. This is I want to clear the city because it's called clear city. So this, right, the city I'm referring to the property that we defined earlier. So this city, and this is in fact in this class, the city equals to blank. Okay. Yeah, we do anything. We can do anything. We can do anything you want. All right. As I said, the very important thing is to make sure the event is working. Now it's working. I'm going to put in my logic. And my logic is simply to clear the city property. Okay. So we can do whatever we want. Okay. Compiled successfully. So I'm going to go there. Oops. I'm going to go to my view. Now city, as you can see here, has the value Toronto, right? Toronto. This is the value, the default value. This is a placeholder, and when I click on here, it's going to invoke the clear city function or method, and then in fact it's going to clear the value of the city. Okay, what happens if I click on this button? Anyone? What happens when I click on this button? Then it will invoke the method called clear city in the model. Okay, and this clear city method will clear the city, will assign nothing to the city. Let's go and check. Uh-oh, what happens here? Well, the city is nothing. There's no value. There's no placeholder, and there's no button. Uh-oh, we're in trouble. There's no button. Why is that? Well, because the button the button has this disabled. We bind the disabled property to an expression or condition saying that a city is nothing in it, then it will disable it. So we have just disabled the the city. All right, sorry, disabled the button. Uh-oh, not good. Hey, but this event, the binding is working. Okay. What do you want to do? Oh wait. Okay. We're gonna do something. Right. So I'm gonna add this H3 right to the view, and this H3. In fact, here I have two uh, event that I'm binding. One's the mouse over, and the other one is mouse out. All right, mouse over, mouse out. I'm using the different syntaxes. This one using the on dash, mouse over, and then I bind it to this function. I'll need to define this function in the model. And for the mouse out, I'm using the parenthesis syntax and binds it to the method called mouse to. Okay, so I'm going to get this into my here after the paragraph. Okay, so one is the mouse and mouse to. So I need to then define this two event in the model. Let me save it first. I know I'm going to get errors. Okay. Now in the model, I need to define two methods. One is mouse. Okay, sure. H3. Okay, why don't you read H3 and see if you understand? H3. What is this? What is this? Okay. On dash. Yeah, exactly. This is on dash is the syntax for the event, the binding. Okay, and what are we binding? We're binding the method called mouse out, mouse over. Okay, mouse over. We're binding this event to a method called mouse. Okay, called mouse. And then again, we can have more than one event attached to an element. Okay, and with the same element string, we're also binding another event. This is mouse out. Okay, just using different syntaxes to a method we call mouse to. Okay, are we good? So we have two events attached to the same element. Now in the model, so we'll need to then define these two methods. The mouse was signing Mississauga to the city. Mouse out, mouse to, mouse to, we're signing Toronto. Okay? So in the model, we'll be defining these two methods, mouse and mouse to. Okay, so you want to save it, compile successfully. We go to there you go. Go in there. I'm going to reset. We're in trouble, right? Because with reset, that is the event that we attach to the button and it will clear the city. Okay, we have no way to get the city back, but then we have this. There you go. This is mouse over. With mouse over, we're getting Mississauga. Mouse over, Mississauga, right? With mouse over. Look at this mouse out. Oh, we're getting Toronto. Mouse over, mouse out, mouse over, mouse out. Reset, mouse over, mouse out, mouse over, mouse out. See that? Okay. So this is great. It works so well. Okay. Doesn't need to be a click. It can be any event that you know. Okay. Click event, mouse over, mouse out, or hover, whatever event that you know that you want to define. Okay. Okay. I'm waiting for question. Exactly. Mouse over is an event. All right. That will invoke a function. Mouse out is another event that will invoke another function or whatever function it is. That's simple. Okay. So we can bind any event that you want to a function. That's it. So this is in fact the event handler. Okay. Any questions on event handler? It's very simple. All right. Okay. Good. All right. You guys want to take a break and come back? We'll get this two-way data binding done. I think we need to some time to cool down a bit because it's been taking a lot of information. Okay, let's take 10. We'll come back at 23, like 225. All right, so back at 225. All right, let me stop the policy recording. So let's go back and look at the. Okay. Okay, and
You are currently the only person in this conference.
yeah, please email me the screenshots. All right, let's kind of like quickly do a quick review on the binding. The very first one is the one-way string interpolation binding. it is from the model to the view. We can define a property in the model, assign some value, and then we can have the value displayed in the view by using the syntax. All right, and this is the most easiest uh, data interpolation. Okay, and we've done some examples. We even defined a property as an object. Right, we define a class and use a class as a type of the property. Okay, then we hard code some value in there, and then we use the string interpolation, and we display the property of the object that we define in the model. Okay, that's one way interpolation. The property binding, we've done we bind a couple properties of an element, such as placeholder, disabled, and then we bind it to a property that we defined in the model. Okay, and also we'd bind the src property of an image uh, element, and also the in the HTML property of a paragraph element. Okay, uh, and then also on the event binding, we defined an event binding and attach to the button element, and event binding will bind an event to a method that we define in the model. As long as you're able to invoke the um, method with the specific binding, you'll be okay. So inside the method, you can do pretty much everything. Okay, you can do pretty much everything that you want to. So we defined a click event and attached to the button. We also defined the mouse over and mouse out events to an X3. Okay, so those are the three data bindings that we covered earlier, and now we're going to look at the two-way binding. The two-way binding mainly is used on the input element, whereby from the model to the view, you can define um, a property and then use the value of the property as value, default value, or placeholder of an input element. I think we used that earlier in here, all right? In here, but here we're using as one way, all right? We're going to try to use the two way. Now, from the view to model, in the situations whereby the users enter information into the input element, we can get that value and then transfer it to a property in the model. Okay, so we'll do that, and that is what we call two-way binding. The binding goes two ways: one from the model to the view, and the other one is from the view to the model. To do that, we'll need to use the directive, the ng model, which is the directive that we're going to use. And also we need to import the form's module into our root module. So, to make sure that we have that, so we go to our root module and make sure the forms module is there. Good. So we have imported the forms module, and hence we'll be able to use the two-way binding. Okay. Now the syntax of the two-way binding is that, as I said, we're going to use the ng model directive and then put it inside a pair of parentheses and then a pair of square brackets. Okay, this is a syntax of a two-way binding, and then we could bind it to a property that we defined in the model, similar to the one-way string interpolation binding and also the property binding. Okay, and this is a syntax for the two-way data binding. Okay, now in fact, this two-way data binding, if you look at it, Does it look familiar? Does it look familiar to you? Yeah, I think we talked about it earlier. This is a combination of property binding and event binding. Okay, and these are the syntax. And with two-way data binding, there's a method called ng model change. This will monitor if there's any changes to the input. Okay, and then we can then bind that event to a method in the model. Okay, so let's practice. Here we have, in fact, very simple. Here we already have this in our code, right? Placeholder and value. We have the placeholder. Let's go back to our template of view. So here with the input element, we already have a placeholder. Well, I mean, yeah, in the value. The value is a property. So I'm going to change this to a property binding. All right. Binding, we're binding to a variable called city, and we do have this city. All right. Now, a two-way binding, as we know that, it is a combination of property binding and event binding. So with event binding, the event is input. We know this is input element. So the input, we're binding the input event to this expression. This expression is that we're going to assign, this is the event target value. We get the event target value, which is this one here, right? And then assigns it to the city property. So namely, we'll get the value and this assigns it to the property called city. This is one way. The other way is that if we'll get this property called city from the model and then binds it to the property of the element, which is the value, right? So the combination of these two is a two-way binding. So let's try this out. All right. Okay, so we have two-way binding defined it. Oops, we'll go to them. Here is the one. Oh, it changes. See that? There's two-way binding. And since we make changes, the input, the same change will apply to the property in the model, and then we have other one-way data binding, right? So the changes to the model, to the city property in the model will be reflected in other one-way data binding that we defined it. This is Scarborough. Good, right? This is two-way binding, and if we look at this one here, since we're changing, this one changes the value of the property in the model, and because of the two-way binding, it also changes in the view. All right, this is, if I make changes here, we'll actually making the one-way data binding from, I mean, the two-way data binding, the view from the view to the model. Okay, and here, this one is actually making changes to the model and reflect in the view. So we've tried it both ways of this two-way data binding. Okay, so it works. Now, instead of defining a property binding and an event binding, well, we're gonna use the ng model keyword, right? Instead of this one. This is just too much coding. I don't want to use this. What I want to do is just use this. All right, this is the ng model, the directive, and then binds it to a property in the model. So this, in fact, is another way to code and the syntax of two-way binding. So I am going to use this two-way binding in here. All right, in the second input, okay, it will work exactly the same way as the first input. Same thing. So we have two-way binding inputs. The other one, no city. You see that? It works exactly the same way. Rondo. Okay, so two-way binding, very simple. And you need to use two-way bindings for input elements because you want to make sure the inputs are being captured, right, and assigned to a property in the model. And also, if there's any changes in model in the backend, in the property in the model in the backend, you want that to be reflected in the inputs. Okay, so that is a two-way binding. So any questions? And please don't forget to use two-way binding. You need to use the forms module. All right. If you don't have the forms module, you get an error. Let's try it. I'm going to remove the forms module. All right. The module is in the imports. I'm going to save it and we'll look at it. It failed to compile. I'm getting a whole bunch of errors, right? Because of I don't have the forms module at hand, so I cannot use the ng model. Okay. So if we go back to the content template, let's the comment of the second input. All right. Oh, sorry. Here. Here. Okay, I'm good because with this first input element, I'm not using the ng model. I'm using the property binding and the event binding. All right, separately or combined. So I'm good. I can still perform a two-way binding and not using the ng model. Okay, I could then use the property binding, combine it with the event binding. Right, and it's still good. Okay, but then if you wanted to use ng model, which is more convenient because you don't have this is too much code, too much typing, right? Then in that case, you need to make sure the forms module there. So let me save it, and then we better change and put back the forms module. Okay, and that should be good now. Okay, okay, any questions on two-way binding? Is very simple. Okay, I suggest you use the ng model instead of using the property binding and the event binding. Just too much typing. You might make a mistake. But then again, to use ng model, you want to make sure the forms module is there. Is there any questions on the data binding? Again, practice is very important. So I would suggest you go home, you go through the slides again, and see if you could, make some changes yourself based on the examples that's here. Okay, I think that this is all for data binding. We'll look at the directive later. Are we good so far? Okay, we'll look at the directives. All right, so let me let me get the other slide. We're gonna look at the directives. The directives is fun. It's fun. It's really fun, and very useful. Very useful. All right, let me go and share the screen. Okay, the Angular directive. So what is a directive in Angular? What does it do? Well, a directive, in fact, is just a custom marker, right, on the DOM element, which is the HTML element, that we could put attach a specific behavior, right? So it's going to be on a DOM element. We can add a directive to make it change the behavior. Okay. Now components are considered directives as well, right? So what it means is we could actually, attach a directive to a component. Now there are two types of directive. One is the structural, and the other one is attribute directive. The structural directive, we can add, change, and remove or manipulate the DOM elements. Very, very powerful. Okay, and the structural directive has the asterisk sign preceding it. Now, there are three common built-in the structural directive, and they are. I'm not going to mention the asterisk. They're the ngf, ng4, and ng switch. The ngf, well, by name, is a condition. The ng4, well, is a for loop. The ng switch is simply is a switch case that we use in JavaScript, right? The equivalent of the if the condition, the for loop, and the switch case. Now you could define your own directives, but we're not going to cover that in this course. All right. As for the attribute directives, the built-in ones are ng style and ng class. The ng style is similar to the inline style that we add to the HTML elements. And ng class is that we can define the classes and attach to certain elements. Right? Those are simple ones, but those are very, very powerful ones. Okay. As I said, we can create our own directive using ng template, but we're not going to cover this in this course. Now, if you want to use any of these directives, such as the structural and the attribute directive, you need to make sure you have the browser module imported to root module. So similar to the two-way binding, we need to make sure the forms module is imported. You use any of this directive, we want to make sure the browser module is imported. Okay, so let's look at some examples of the structural directive. The three are the ngif, ng4, and ng switch. Now with ng switch, this is switch case and switch default that we're going to use together, right? And as I said, it really behaves similar to the JavaScript if, the for loop, and then the switch case in JavaScript. Let's look at the an example. I'm going to explain this, and I'm going to put this into our project. All right. So in here we have a simple snippet of HTML code. The first one we have a div. All right, we have a div element, and in the div element we have a ng4 ngf directive. And this ngf directive is binds to a property in a model. Okay. Now, as we all know that the if is simply an if statement that reacts to either a true or false. Okay. Now, this app status, it is a property in the model. If we assign the true value to this app status, so this if statement or this ngif directive will be true. So what it does is that if this is true and we attach it to an element, then this element will be visible. All right. If the if this is false, namely if we assign a false value to app status, this will be invisible. We can make an element appear or disappear. Okay, we're gonna try this. Let's try this. I'm gonna go into my content. Uh, in here, I'll do it. the very very well, at the very beginning. All right, so that we don't have to scroll. All right, I do it before between the two between the two between here after the picture. Right. Okay, and I'm gonna do a HR. Right, so that I know it's gonna be okay, and then okay. Well, this is the code. I just put in the div and then use the ng4 and then binds it to the app status. Okay, we know this app status is not there. We have not defined it, so hence we'll get an error. So let's go in here, go to my model, and I'm going to put in the app status. I'm defining property, and I'm going to assign to be true. Okay. Well, oh, I'm going to put in something. Yes. Okay. Put in true. There you go. This is a div. Okay, good. So we're seeing the div. If I assign it false, gone. All right, we just made the div disappear. Okay, we can make it appear by assigning a true value to, there you go. All right, it's there. And all we did was to assign, was to use a ngf directive and assigns it to, and binds it to a variable or a property, so we can make it appear or disappear. Okay, depending on the values of this app status property. Easy, eh? This is how we use if. Okay. And if you look at the code again, we have this one. This is simply oh, the one-way interpolation. Let's do that. So in here, okay, we have a paragraph element and app title. In here, app title, I need to define app title. Otherwise, I'll get an error. App title reads welcome. Okay, so this is welcome. Right, save it, and we go and save it again. So I will see, oh, app title. Did I not save this? Yeah, maybe I have not saved this. There you go. Okay. Welcome to my site. Right. Welcome. One-way string interpolation to my site. App status is true. Go in it, go up and change to false. We won't be able to see the diff anymore. There you disappear. Okay. So that's simple. Any questions so far? Rather simple, eh? All right. Go. Okay. Let's get this URL. I mean UL. No, this UL is a bit interesting. We have a UL, and then we have an li. Right. This li, in fact, is a simple item. Okay, allied element. However, we have this ng4 directive attached to this li. But the condition of this for statement is that, well, we're using a let off. All right, let off. This is a loop to say let item be the properties or would be the elements of this array. Right, so this iteration, is going to be iteration for each iteration. I'm going to assign the element of this app list array to, okay, and then I will be the index. So we start with 0, 1, 2, 3, and what I am going to display in the item in the li will be the index. Okay, index. And then the item, well, it looks like the app list is an array of objects because item dot, there's a dot notation there, rank. What I would need to do is in the model, I will need to define a property called app list, which is an array of objects. Okay, and one of those property in the object will be called rank. Okay, so what happens is that with this ng4, it depends on the number of elements in this array, and then for each element, I'll get an li. What it means is if this array has 6 objects, I'll get 6 lis. Okay, so this is what happens. So I'll get an error because I have not defined this up list in the model. So I'll go up there. I'm gonna copy this, right? So I'm defining an array, and probably called up list, which is an array of objects. So each object has a country and a rank property, and the rank property will be displayed in here. Okay, now you may ask this, what is this? Yeah, what is this? This is the type. Okay, remember this? This is the type. Now in the my student, we've defined the class as a type. So we're saying that my student is a class, uses the class, uses the class student as a type. But in here, we don't have that. So I'm going to say use any meaning just anything. It can be anything. All right. And also it is an array. Okay. So app list is going to be an array of anything. All right. We could have defined it a class for this, but we don't. So I'm going to use anything. Okay. So this bypasses the type checking, and it is an array. So no, it is an array. So it better be an array. Okay. Do this. Uh, Look at it. I think we're getting some errors there. All right. Let's see if I get it. Well, there's no error, but then think back, I think we'll be able to get something. Oh, sorry. False, of course. True. All right. So what if this will remove this? Uh, I think Annie will let us. Okay. At least, yeah. Well, looks like the is kind of loose, right? But I really suggest that we will do a proper checking. Make sure if we are going to assign an array, would better be an array. Okay, so if we go and look at the li, we're actually getting assigning each element of the array to the item, and then item will have the objects of the array. So we're displaying I, which is the index, and start with 0 and 1, and then the item rank. So we have 1 and 2, 1 and 2. All right, we could add some more. This we're actually using the one-way interpolation. Item dot what do we have? Country. All right. Country. Okay. If we add one more the properties in there, country Canada, and rank is, let's say, 3. We get 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, and then whatever from the objects. Right. So this is a simple little loop whereby we're repeating the number of uh, allies, right? Because if that's what we want to, it doesn't have to be allies. It can be whatever elements. It can be a paragraph. It can be a div. Okay. It will repeat the number of times from this array. Okay. So any questions on this ngf and ng4? It's rather simple, but it's very powerful. This is the equivalent of the if statement and the for loop in JavaScript. As I said, if we don't have a type, right, then we use any, and we know the data we're reading is an array. Okay, unlike we have in the students, we have a type here. Okay. All right. Now, before I think TypeScript has made some updates. Before we have to use type string. Okay, but now I think they change it. For strings, is a we don't need to specify it. If you say the no, my number. Okay, well, where is it? Okay, let's say my ID. Okay, number. Before have to use this number, we have to specify the type. All right, but now I think they changed it. Even with this one, before you have to, if you don't have a type, this is an object because of an object. If you don't have a type, you have to say any, and if this is an array, you have to make sure the type indicates it is an array. But now it looks like they have changed it in recent versions, so it doesn't even allow, it doesn't need a type. Okay, but again, they changes rules, very often. But I would always suggest that put in type if you know the type. If not, put in any, and if this is an array, put it in. Okay, like I used to, even the string. I used to do this. But then somehow they took this away, which is good because there'll be less typing. All right. Uh, so for arrays, yeah, well, for arrays, I suggest we'll put in the type. Or not in the type, not in the type. This is the type. Okay. Yeah, for any, it applies to anything, right? Because especially if you have array of objects, all right, array of objects, then and also if you have arrays of mixed data types in terms of the elements, then yes. Okay, but now it looks like this type the version I'm using, this TypeScript, this doesn't even need that. Yeah, it looks like it automatically recognizes it and doesn't need that. In earlier versions of TypeScript, yes, you do. It's very, very straight. Okay. All right, let's look at the switch. This is easy, right? The ngIf just takes in a condition. The ng4 or simply iterations of an object. Okay. All right, let's look at the switch. The switch is rather simple. We're going to use the ng switch, right? Binds it to a property, right? And in the, of course, you have to define the property in the model, and then we use the ng switch case, All right. Then if this is it, then it will display this description. Otherwise, it's going to be ng switch default. Okay, so let's try this out. This is rather simple. This is similar to the switch case again in the JavaScript. So I'm going to put this into the let's get it here after the loop, right? Failed because we've yet to define this parse selection. I'm going to put in Toyo, which is one of the oops. Here I've got Toyota, right? Because there's a match that made will find Toyo, and then it'll get it display Toyota. If I change this to VW, I'll get the Volkswagen. By putting something is not in here, then you use the default, which is the GM. Okay. Again, this is rather straightforward, and if you use the switch case in JavaScript, that's very similar. All right, good. So these are the structural directive, the ngF, ng4, and then the ng switch. So we'll move on to the attribute directive again. Oh, okay. This one is actually a combination of the if, the for, and then the switch. Right? I'll let you run through the yourself. Here we have the two attribute directive. One is the ng star. The ng star, in fact, is first similar to the inline styles that we use right in the CSS. All right. If we recall, for any element that we could actually define style equals to blah blah blah. But instead of doing that, we use the ng style, right, which is the directive, and we bind it to, of course, a CSS value. Okay, and that's it. This will override whatever CSS you have defined it for this component or for this element. All right, so let's try this. We have how many? Okay, we have a whole bunch of paragraph elements. What do we get in here? Let's do this. I'm going to go in there and put this in. And in here, I'm calling red paragraph. There you go. This is the red paragraph. And let me go in the CSS. I'm going to add one more. Paragraph. Background and color blue. Okay. Okay, watch. So I have a whole bunch of paragraph elements. Now they're getting blue. So wait. Okay, I don't have anything written, so that's fine. So they're getting blue backgrounds, except for this, right? Because this one I have ng style, and the background is red. So applied to a paragraph elements, and as you know, it's similar to the in-class CSS style. This one overrides the CSS I have for this component, right? And hence only this one will have the red background. All other paragraphs elements are having the blue background. Okay. Okay, it looks like a question is coming up. Oh, the default is that if there's no match, right? If there's no match. Okay, if there's no match, if you don't have Toyo, VW, and BMW, okay, it will be this. Just make sure you have a default for every switch case. Okay. So all right. So this is the entry side. Very simple. The if you have if you want to use inline styles, entry style is going to be the one. All right, and the two syntaxes. Either you do it like this. And if you want to, if there's anything that's with a dash, then you want to make sure that you have quotes. All right, for the property and also for the quote for the value, right? So you want to make sure if there's any property including a dash, put the quote, single quote, okay, for the property. All right. Okay. Again, NG style, you don't have to hard code the CSS styles. I mean the declarations or rules. You could bind it to a property. All right. I don't think we can do that in JavaScript or HTML. For inlines, we will have to put the styles in there. But here we could bind the ng style or directives to a property, and inside the model, then we can define the CSS rules. Okay, I think this is good. This is really benefit or flexible, and also then this style we can put some logic in there depending on certain factor. Okay, we can say if billing or if balance is less than 20K, use certain CSS style. If it's above 20K, make it blank, make it bright red. All right, so so we can do that in here. So instead of hard coding the style, we can assign it to a property. Okay, and that's powerful. All right. Again, this is what we talked about a bit earlier. Then we can assign it to a function, right? And this function, in fact, will allow us to make changes to the CSS depending on whatever. Okay, so very powerful. All right, hard coding it, binds it to a property, binds it to a function, and the function will decide what to display or which CSS rules that we use. Okay, any questions on ng style? It's rather simple, but very powerful. All right, so the this is just to fix the case, right? We're using the two uppercase to convert it to convert first, and then we'll do the comparison. Okay, so this is just to make sure if if this is really referring to this. All right, so all right, let's look at the second attribute directive. This is ng class. The ng class binds it to a property that we defined in the CSS. All right, so it binds it to a list of classes. Right, it binds it to a list of classes. All right, and we can just two syntaxes. One is use the double quote, and inside a list of classes separated by comma, and then inside a pair of single quote, or we could do it as an array, right? An array of classes. Okay, of course. Okay, so either syntax is good. But if we do that, if we use the ng class, we'll make sure we have to make sure this class or classes that we use, they are better defined in the CSS. Okay, otherwise, it'll be no effect. If you say this is red and you don't have a class called red defined in CSS, nothing will be applied. Okay, so this is one way to define it. Another way is to use the array, the form of an array. Okay, or we can define, or we can assign a class depending on a condition. Right, depending on the condition, we can say the black border, which is a class, right? If this is true, all right, or red, this one is red, this is a class. If this property is if it's true, then we'll assign the red class. Okay, and this is again another class called black border if it's true. So if we set true, then it will apply black border. If this is false, then we don't. But why do you want to assign a false here? Okay, you can simply not put this in. Okay, however, it makes sense more to bind it to a property, and inside your model you can then assign true or false. Okay, of course, it makes sense. It will be based on a condition. Okay, or another way to do this is that binds it to a function. So depends on the return value of the function, we'll decide whether to use this class or not. If this is true, then we'll apply this black underscore border as a class or use this class. If this is true, we won't use this class. Okay, so this is from actually coding the classes to use to putting in condition. Okay, so this is hard coding. So it assigns it to true. So we're going to use the black underscore border class. This depends on the value of a property, and this one depends on the return value of an event of a function. Okay, so either one is your choice as to which one you want to use. All right, and that's it. This is ng class and ng styles are rather simple. The ng style, you can think of it as inline style, right? That you use in the HTML, and you bind it to a property, or you can hard code it. Whichever way that you want to use it is fine, and you can also bind it to a function. Okay. And the ng class, same thing, similar to ng style. You apply the classes that you want to use to certain element, and you can hard code the class or classes that you want to use, or you can put them in an array, or you can use the condition, right, to decide whether certain classes you want to use. You can hard code it with either true or false, but false, as I said, you must want to put it in, right? But then you can also bind it to a property or binds it to function. Okay, I think it's more just makes more sense. If you have conditioned that you bind it to either a property or a method. Okay. So, is there any questions on the attributes, the two attributes, the structural and the attribute, sorry, on the directives? So any questions on the structural directive and also on the attribute directives? You guys good? All right, now practice is very important. Okay, so I would suggest go home and go through the slides, and of course, try out these examples. Okay, get yourself comfortable, ask questions. Okay, and play with it. I've said it. Yeah, exactly. I've said it many times. It doesn't matter what programming language you're learning, be it be it just a language, programming language, or framework like this. Practice, practice. Okay. Uh, Now we have I put the post assignment 3. We can go through assignment 3, or let's do this. Let's look at the how do we deploy. All right, deploy a project. So let me bring this up. To deploy the project, we need to do something. Now, what we have done here using the ng-serve, in fact, uh, we're actually testing the program, okay? But that is not deploying, okay? This is not deploying. We're actually testing it online, but we cannot ask people to use our machine to actually run it. So when the project is done, when everything's okay, we need to deploy it. Okay, now to deploy it, well, first of all, in here you're trying to deploy it to cPanel, right? Because that's the user that we use. So let me go through the the process. So to deploy it, first of all, we need to stop the ng-serve. So we don't want it to keep running. All right. So let me go to my terminal, and I'm going to stop it. Okay, it's not running, and it's not running. Okay, so I'm just so, and then the next step is that we're going to run a script. Right, the script is that we're going to build it. So ng build, of course you have to be inside the project folder. Same thing here, ng build, and you could specify an output path, right? Here using the output path, and this will create the directory for the build files. Right? You don't have to. It'll give you a default one. I think it's called disk dist. I think we look at it from the last week in the let me see here in the JSON file, in the Angular file, right? Build. Let me see here. There you go. Let me see if I could find it. I'm just seeing it here. Picks up. There you go. This is it. All right. Output path. If we don't specify it, output path, right? If we don't specify it's going to be create this folder or directory for us. Okay, but we can override the output path. Okay, in here we can put in cPanel, so it creates cPanel for us, and also the this is the base href, and what does it do? Base href. I think I saw it somewhere. Not here in the config. There you go. Okay, base href. Okay, so again, we can override. Oh no, this is the URL. I don't think it has it there. So the base href used to points to the place whereby we can run the index.html. Okay, so let's try it. With this one, I'm gonna open up the terminal window. All right, because it's small, I can move it. I want to go into my project. directory, right? And it's called my, right, okay, I'm in my project directory. And then I'm going to go and type in ng build. Well, let's do ng build, all right? Ng build. I don't need to use any parameter, right? But it's optional, but I mean, may not be able to use it. Right, ng build. Okay, it's done. All right, so you can, so go, let's go to, just close all of this. So you can see here, this is the directory, disk, and then my first app. Okay, we looked at it earlier from the Angular adaptation file. This, if we did not specify the output path option, we'll get this. All right, and it has everything that we need or that we need to deploy it. And you can see here, we have the assets because there's a, we have some image, whatever that we need, and then of course, very important, we have the index.html, and all the other files disappear and they became with a whole bunch of JS files. So these are the JavaScript files that when we build it, it compiles all the code into JavaScript. Okay, if you know how to read it, it's there. It's pretty much compressed, meaning there's no space. All right, and actually, it's all here for you. This is a testing. This is really the runtime. Okay. And then it has this here, the styles.css. This is the global style sheet if we use it. All right. And then that's it. It's very small. So in order to run it, we can actually run from this. Okay. Oops. Not okay. Get some error. Yeah. So you couldn't find it. Well, because we did not use, we didn't change the base href, right? We need to change it to /. So we use the current directory as the base, right? So we don't have that because we have not used it. So I'm going to change it. Okay. There you go. Okay. It's able to find all the files. And this is the program, the project that we have created. See, it's exactly the same way as we run it. This is 4200. This is do the serve. This is running it from the VSC. This is running the JavaScript code. Okay, and with this we can deploy the whole directory. We deploy this directory, this one. Okay, this folder to my cPanel. So okay, so what you want to do then is to make the file of this directory, and you can deploy this directory to cPanel the same way that you deploy assignment 1 and assignment 2. Okay, so that's one way to do it. And if we don't want the default directory, what we can do is we can ng build, right? But this time we're going to use the output path option, and this is A3 for assignment 3, and we better change the href, right, so that it will be able to run it. So again, we will create a directory called A3 for us, and all the files will be in that folder. There we go, right? So A3, right, this is the one. Okay, it has the same files as in the what's cPanel? I forget what cPanel for disk, right, and this one here, it's gonna be same. Okay, I think I ran the version of cPanel. So in here, you see that it has the dash, a period slash, and I can actually run this and be able to get it running. Okay, so that is how we deploy it. Very simple. That's how we deploy or build or deploy. We need to build it. then we zip this this directory and upload to cPanel. Okay. So any questions on how to deploy it? This is an explanation as to deploying cPanel. You should know this already. Okay, that's looks like there's a question. Okay, the deadline is 2 weeks. In 2 weeks. Uh, can we do the same way? I mean, both. Is what do you, can you please clarify the options? Yeah, you can deploy to cPanel. Yeah, both these two options. What two options? Yeah, you need to use these two options. Okay, you don't need to use. Okay, let's bring up the. Okay, you don't need to use. You don't need to use the output path, right? You don't need to use the output path. Okay. Uh, if you use the default, the disk, the disk, and then uh, the the folder, the subfolder of your project name, yeah, that's fine. Okay, but you definitely need to change the base href. Okay. Yeah, the first option is really optional. Okay. All right. Do you want me to go through the uh, assignment briefly? Yes or no? Okay. Do you see the assignment? All right, the assignment, right? Okay. Well, the assignment here, I want you to create a mobile website using Angular framework. Of course, you need to create a new Angular project, right? So create new Angular project. The name of this Angular project is called your login name A3. Okay. If your login name is called ABC, it can be ABC A3. All right. And this project has three components. Okay. You know how to create these three components already. It's called header, content, and footer. Well, this is pretty much the same as our in-class examples. uh, you need to use external data. We'll cover external data next week, but you could, in fact, work on this assignment today because you do know how to create a class. All right. So for this external data, you need to create two classes. One class is called your login name, whatever your login name. Okay. Uh, I want this class to be in the file, right? Called your login name.ts. You should know how to do this already because we went through an example. So look at this student.ts file. All right. So creating this class will have these properties: your name, campus, student number, your login name, your shared email address, and assignment title. Now, this is only the data item. You can use whatever property names and the data type of your choice. Okay, it's your choice. But I want to have this data being defined in the class. Okay. Now, when you have a class defined, you need to create an external file. Now, we'll talk about the external file next week. But in the meantime, what you could do, you could like the student.ts file, you can create internal a property to hold this data inside your component. Okay, you can do that so that you could carry on with this assignment. Uh, After we cover the external file, then you can create an external file. Okay. The second class is called book. Again, same way, defined in in a file, right? This class will contain this five pieces of information, or the ID, the book name, the publisher, the ISBN number, and then the price. Again, you decide on the name of the properties and also the data type. All right. So again, when you have this class defined, it use it as a type, right, to create an external file. Again, same as the this one here. You can create a property for this value. Okay, and the book is an array of at least four books. Okay, are we good so far for the external data? Two classes and two external files. Okay. Now let's look at the components. The components we have header, footer, and content. For the header and footers, for the components, I want them to have the same format. All right, same format. Regarding if you can have H3, the better both be H3, and the H3 will have the same format. If you assign a background color, they should have the same background color. The font, the color type, it should all be the same for these two components. What you could do, you could actually do them individually, but you want to make sure they all the same. Or for the CSS styles, you can use the styles.css file, all right, and apply the CSS rules in that file. As I explained last week, the style that you apply to the styles.css file will apply to all the components, right? So that is pretty much like the global CSS style. So you can use that. If you use that, you don't have to worry about the formats are not the same. Okay. So in the header component file, in header component, I want you to use the string interpolation to display the assignment title, your student number, and your name. All right. What it means is that you're not going to hard code this. You need to then import the class and the data, right, to the header and footer components, and selectively display the data depending on what I require you to do in here. Okay. So pretty much you'll be importing the same class and then the same data file, right? For your login name, and then use it in the header and footer components. Any questions so far? It's rather pretty straightforward. I think in the in class examples, I have all that already, except that it's hard coded in the component in terms of the data. But the requirements here is that you read from external file. We'll learn that next week. Okay. And then in the component, this the content component. I want you to import the book class, and then the data, right? The data is of course the book data. Then in the template or the view of of the content component, I want to have two sections, and the two sections will be arranged side by side. So here I said sections A and B. Section A will be on the left of section B, and section A will list the book names, all right, using the ng4 directive, right? So do not hard code the book names here. I want this to be displayed using the ng4 directive. Okay, and we have examples today, so you can refer to that. And the if it's going to be a list, all right, of at least four books. There'll be at least four items in there. So if any item or book is selected with the click event, so you want to do is to define a click event to the LIs. All right. If any one of this book is being clicked on, then the details of the book will be displayed in section B. All right. So you have two sections, A and B. A will be on the left side of B. A will list all the book names, and if I click on any one of those book names, the details of the selected book will be displayed in section B. And that's it. First simple little program. Uh, so I think we've pretty much covered all of this except for the external data. You can in fact start working on it today. Okay. So some other requirements you can read yourself. The grading rubric you can read yourself, and this require you to publish to cPanel, and we just covered the cPanel. Okay. One thing very important is that uh, to submit, well, other than you publish it to cPanel, I want you to submit a zip file. Now, what are you going to zip? I don't want you to zip the project folder. As you know that folder contains node modules directory of couple hundred, 500 megs. So the zip file will be huge. So I want you to zip the SRC folder only. Okay? Please do not do that. Do not zip the entire Angular project folder. You just zip the SRC folder. It's much, much smaller. All right. So I wanted to put in an item in the rubric and saying if you zip the Angular folder, I'll take marks away from you. And this is the first time. I won't do that. But this for the second time, for assignment 4, I'll definitely put it in there because I do not want you to submit a zip file of couple hundred megs. So make sure, please, 3 times is important. Make sure you zip only the SRC folder and you submit that zip file to Dropbox. Okay, and also include your cPanel URL. Okay, this is again the third time you should be doing this. You should know how to do that. All right. So any questions? Okay, and it's very important. The last one, assignment must be complete individually. Okay, no collaboration. I've caught students doing it already for assignment 1 and 2, so I'll be watching. Okay, so any questions on assignment 3? Pretty straightforward, and we've pretty much covered all in terms of how to do that, we covered them all except for the external data, of which we'll be covering that next week. So you could start working on this assignment today. Okay? Okay, so any questions on what we have covered today and also on the assignment? All right. You have quiz. All right. So I'll open it up later today. Okay. Looks some questions are coming. Yeah, you could yeah, whatever. Yeah, sure. You could use great. Yeah, use CSS. That's right. If you know how to do that. It's very simple, right? I know. I like to use that. It's so easy. Whatever CSS style that you want to use, right? Just make sure they're side by side. Okay, so any other questions? Okay, if there are no other questions, I think we're good today. So now I'm going to stop the recording now.